Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to our webinar. We're really excited to have you all on here today. As per usual, we are just waiting for a few more people. People are joining us slowly. So we have a poll up. If you could please answer the poll. I'd like to get a bit of an idea of who we have on the webinar today. So take a moment, let us know who you are, and we'll just wait for a few more people. Okay, it looks like we're getting a few more people online here. So thanks everyone who answered that poll. For those people joining us, feel free to just quickly answer our poll. Let us know who you are. It just gives us a better idea of who we've got on the webinar today, and then we can make sure that we are talking in terms that are relevant and useful to you guys. So as per usual, for those of you who are new to our webinar, we will be recording this session, so we'll be able to share it with all of you afterwards. And we would love to make this as interactive as possible. So please, please, please put your questions in the chat box. We do have a moderator standing by. They'll be able to either answer questions, whether that's audio issues or other, or real questions for us, and then she'll pass them along, and we'll answer them for you. Other than that, let's get started. So I'm really excited to have Jason here with me today. Hi, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well, thanks. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Sunny,
so
sunny
Jason comes from BuildPulse. We're talking over each other.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, we're really excited to have you on today. And I'm going to let you kick off this webinar. So I think we do have another poll to throw in. We want to get a bit of an idea, because we do have people that are familiar with Visual BACnet that are coming to learn about BuildPulse, and people that are that know BuildPulse are interested, that are coming to hear a bit more about Optigo. So we're just going to put that poll up and learn a little bit more about how much you, our listeners, know about BuildPulse, and that'll help Jason in his description and discussion here. But while we're getting that underway, Jason, I'll let you maybe introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. So I'm VP of Product here at BuildPulse. We are a plug-and-play analytics solution for buildings. It doesn't matter if you're a school building to a skyscraper. We'll connect to the existing building automation system. We'll pull all the data out of that system, map it for you, and push it to the cloud. And then there we provide standardized reports where we help facility managers, energy managers, and other teams run their buildings more efficiently. And a little bit of our background, I started the company about 4.5 years ago with Bryce Kosnick, the CEO. And basically he comes from the world of building automation systems, where he had helped customers from University of New Hampshire to Harvard basically do building automation sort of controls and installs and upgrades. And my background, I come from the sort of technology sector, helping different groups like Google and Microsoft use data to improve their operations and process. So we're a company that was founded sort of a mashup from the technology side and from the building automation space. Great. So my screen gets kicked back and forth a little bit, I think, when we have the poll going. I don't see the results. But I can just hop in to sort of how we go about helping teams using BACnet and their building automation system. And then on the tail end of that, we'll hop over to you, Monica, and have you talk about how you help optimize those networks. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. So oftentimes, teams are pitched on technology just solving everything. So, if you install a new building automation system, if you install a new sort of control system, it's just going to take care of all issues, and you don't have to worry about, people, right? Robots are going to take over the world. We hear over and over again. But in reality, you can have the most advanced tools in the world, but if your team doesn't know how to use them, they can't really compete with the most basic. So coming from that sort of online world where we were using automation and sort of analytics, we find oftentimes that the the machine learning tools and other things need human interaction. They need people to push it in the right direction. The same is true in the building automation space. If your BAS isn't wired up correctly, and if your team is sort of manually doing process and not taking advantage of the tool, you can be back to square one. So when we work with teams, starting out before you get down that sort of technology road, the first important step is, what are you trying to improve? What key performance indicators or KPIs do you have? And where are you at as far as trying to either optimize your team or your equipment or energy? So here at BuildPulse, when we work with teams, we basically help them by focusing on the labor side of things. So if you can reinvest some of your team's time, for example, that are shifting the time from looking at data or reactively fixing things to being more proactive on fixing things, you're going to then see impacts on your equipment. So if your team has more time to get ahead of scheduling or get ahead of sort of those audits, you can see reductions in equipment runtime, and then that leads to an impact on energy. So even before you get into technology and all the optimization, really having a clear team goal is going to help out your team a ton.
And can you give us an example? I guess you're probably going to give some examples of those later. Is that right?
Yeah. So we'll walk through a couple of them. It's keeping in mind, whenever we talk about technology or whenever we talk about anything we're doing, what's the impact going to be on your organization? What goals are you trying to focus on? And if it's something like adding more technology or adding another BAS system or a reporting system, what is the thing that you're trying to fix? And then does that sort of offset other things? So a great example, the reason we started this company is we noticed that other sort of analytic solutions, people were spending a lot of time manually maintaining. So instead of shifting time from looking at data to fixing things, we found that teams using older systems actually spent their time looking in one system to looking in a different system. So you really want to figure out what that goal is before you start adding more and more sort of systems or making changes to either your team layout or your equipment layout. And so along those lines, you have all the different sort of people that interact in the building. So you'll have energy managers who care about energy. They'll either want to do like load shifting or reduce equipment runtime from 24/7 to a more tighter operation. You have facility teams. Oftentimes they want to avoid cold complaints. They want to verify work and changes. And overall, if they can just reduce the time to hunt for issues, they're going to have huge savings. Going back to that sort of going back to the beginning of optimizing your infrastructure and how can you make an impact with building automation systems. If you paid money for a BACnet system, building automation systems should change based on weather and occupancy. If it's not dynamically changing, then why did you buy a building control system in the first place? And we'll see this a lot with teams where we'll go in and we'll sort of connect to an existing system and equipment's running 24/7 or even running 9 hours when it should be running at 8. And there could be a number of things. Oftentimes the BACnet in actual status isn't linked to a schedule properly, so we'll see that a lot. Sometimes, like Gonzaga University, I'll bring up later, their team, they're managing 90 buildings, and their tech would go make a minor change in a system, trying to make an energy improvement, so like adjusting a piece of equipment by 1 degree, set equipment into 24/7 hour operation. And it's, the guy is busy, he's making a bunch of changes, so by having a system that helps him sort of find that little tweak, forcing the 24-hour operation helps him. And so if you look at your equipment lifetime, if you're running equipment 24/7, you're basically reducing your equipment lifetime to 1/4 of its potential operation. And even if you're looking at shaving just 1 hour off of your equipment, that's potentially a 10% increase in equipment lifetime. So even though a lot of people talk about advanced algorithms and things, a very basic schedule discipline can have a huge impact on extending equipment lifetime. And you mentioned conversation. I can't see any of the questions. Has anything come up so far, or is there anything I can go through?
I haven't seen anything, but I'll let you know if I see anything.
Great.
But anyone out there, feel free to ask us questions. None so far.
Great. So, around equipment schedules, what, you have technology, or you have a BAS that might provide you some information. So how can you sort of shift your team's strategy to make an impact with your building automation system or with data that you have? So one group, basically, what they do, I like to call it the buddy system. So whoever's making that change in the building automation system or in BACnet, if it's the building tech or the energy manager, if they make a change, for example, I brought up Gonzaga making that sort of change on that piece of equipment. If they make a note of it and then just have an energy manager sort of come back through and audit one or two things, it's going to help catch a lot of issues. So, for example, if things are running on the weekend, sometimes people will make changes on a Friday that force things into running all weekend long. Sometimes, the energy manager, so Gonzaga, for example, they have the guy making the changes, and then the energy manager will follow for maybe 30 minutes a week to verify things. So here we actually have an equipment runtime report. So BuildPulse, we gather all the data from your BACnet or BAS system, and we'll trend it every 5 minutes, and then we'll create aggregated reports. And here there's a AC unit, and you can see the hours of operation on weekends, weekdays, and all month. And it'll help your team sort of focus on issues of, are you having weekend schedule issues? Is the team maybe forcing things into override on the weekends versus weekdays? So the whole goal of any of these, if you ever have a reporting system or engine, is what is the process that your team would use with the report? And then are they shifting time from manually inspecting something to just at a high level reviewing runtimes and equipment? So outside of just schedules, there's also sequence of operations and set points. A great question on the sequence of operations. Oftentimes fault detection and diagnostics engines are supposed to audit for that. And the trade-off being, if you have a building with 100 pieces of equipment, you'd have to have a guy sit there and sort of manually inspect the data over and over again. So here's just a snapshot of one of our customer systems. This is an AHU one. And I often like to ask, can you, from looking at this, figure out what the issue is? Just from inspecting this, how long would this take you to identify an issue? And a lot of the teams that we've worked with who are really proactive, like UNH and Gonzaga, they had a guy spending about an hour or two a day, so just digging through the BAS, looking for little issues and or writing rules or creating rules in their building automation system. And they found that not only were they missing things because they had to just audit it at that exact time, but they also spent a lot of time manually doing that. Here's just a snapshot of a leaking economizer issue that we found. And you can see that it's not happening every day. So if your team just happened to not look at that piece of equipment on that day, they potentially would have missed the issue. And so going back to the shifting time from manually reviewing data to using aggregate reporting, our building automation, or BuildPulse basically manually audits all that equipment automatically audits that equipment every 5 minutes and provides a high-level report so teams can just see their top issues in the week. And I'll just hop into a couple examples really quick. I mentioned Gonzaga a couple times. They basically, using the system, going back to the set point sequences and schedules, they found about 100K in savings identified in 20 buildings. The value for them a lot is the reduction in the manual troubleshooting. So they had about 100,000 data points that they would have had to manually review, or even in the building automation system took hours every week. And so by basically using BuildPulse for verification and automation on the reporting and analytics side, they had one tech basically shift about half of his time to being more proactive in fixing issues. Sam, I mentioned UNA. Oh, sorry, you're going to say?
Sorry, I'm just going to quickly interrupt because we have a question that just came in a minute or two ago from David saying, don't BAS systems show this type of data themselves? Can you maybe speak to the difference here?
Yeah, so the building automation system is not going to tell you the actual cost of the issue. So we have what's called a weighted estimated cost, and that helps prioritize issues. So if I go back to this leaking economizer, sometimes we'll have economizer issues that only happen for 10 minutes in a day. Sometimes we have them happen over an extended time. And by using that weighted estimated cost, as well as having the actual runtime of the issue, we will provide a prioritized list of things to go fix. So most times building automation systems, you'll have to manually set up trends, and those trends only last for 1 to 3 days. And with our system, you don't have to set up any of those trends. We actually report it up week over week as well as monthly. And that's really the key that has helped these teams. So Gonzaga, for example, has automated logic, which is a great building automation system on the reporting side. But the sheer amount of time it took for their team to build those reports, verify the reports, it's one more thing for their team to maintain. And so that's where they got that 50% shift. So the guy who's updating their automated logic system, instead of that 50% time going through the BAS, that was shifted to actually fixing issues. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. It did for me, at least.
And also, this is the last sort of slide for UNH, and at the tail end, happy to go through any more specifics. UNH, they have a legacy Handover system, and they basically, very similar thing. They had a guy who's doing schedules, another thing in their building automation system. And they switched to using BuildPulse to collect all that data and also just provide 1 to 5 things that they could fix each week. The beauty of the way that we do this is that your team doesn't have to come up to speed on a new system. We basically just have a prioritized list of 1 or 2 things that they should check out. And then the team just spends 1 to 2 hours a week either fixing schedule issues, set point issues, or sequence issues. So you don't have to learn a brand new system. You don't have to learn how to program a bunch of stuff. You still can be experts in your building automation system as far as making those tweaks, but you don't have to be experts in analytics and big data. So on the tail end, happy to go into more questions, but I just want to leave plenty of time for you guys on the Optigo side if you want to go back and take control.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, but I do want to quickly ask you, so I mean, universities, there's a huge variation in the size and the way that they're set up in terms of their controls. Can you speak a little bit to the types of universities or the setup that you guys are maybe the most find you're the most helpful for, or if the different ways you work with different types of these divisions?
Yeah. So just trying to see if I can clarify. Like, what is there like an optimal university that we work with or system? Is that what you're getting at?
In our experience at Optigo, you have everything from a university that has 1 person in working on the controls to a department of 40. And there's very different ways that vendors and integrators and consultants work with all of those different sizes of universities. Was there an optimal one or one that you guys work with most, or how do you adapt?
Yeah, so basically when we built the system, it's open so that both internal teams and external teams can use it to verify and have a common sort of platform to communicate on. So we have some teams that have large internal teams. So like University of New Hampshire, for example, they have 2 or 3 energy managers. They have a guy making building automation sort of controls. They have a decent sized team and budget to reinvest in energy savings. So for them, they use it heavily internally. Gonzaga, they have a smaller team, so they only have 1 guy who's going through and sort of making those changes. So they use it for that guy. He'll look at that 1 report a week, 1 or 2. But then if they need external help from another vendor, they'll have that vendor come in and actually look at the system as well. So if they hire a third-party commission group or do anything like that, they'll have them review the system. To be honest with you, it doesn't matter if you have a small team or a big team. If you're having your team manually go through and check all of these systems, it's worth the time and investment to find an automated reporting platform, because then you're going to shift their time from just clicking on stuff over and over again to actually going out and helping make a fix, right? It's all about wrench time. How much time are you having somebody actually fix something and work on something versus just look into things? So,
yeah.
Yep.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we just put up a poll. Thank you for those of you who responded. Quite a few of you are familiar with Visual BACnet, so I'll try not to bore you with the specifics of the tool, but also quite a few of you aren't, so I'll try and play that fun game of making everyone happy. But I think it's really great for us to be on this webinar today with you guys at BuildPulse, because we often have people talking to us about analytics and, oh, you know, we already have an analytics program, and there's so many analytics programs out there, and it can be a bit confusing, and a lot of them are new, and you know, we'll get confused for doing the same thing, but what we do is actually very different and can work together very well. So we have lots of different people that are using BuildPulse and various analytics that are similar and different on their systems, as well as what we use. So one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I really like to discuss, is that right now all of these universities are commissioning their networks, whether they do it internally or have a vendor or an integrator or a third party that they hire to do the commissioning for them. They're commissioning their IOs and they're commissioning their sequences. They're running their energy analytics, looking at how many dollars they're spending per hour. And sometimes that means kicking in power from their own cogen plant, and also ensuring that they're not heating and cooling a room simultaneously, or having a rogue valve that's broken or something. But very, very few universities and very few people in general are commissioning networks on a regular basis. And that's just because it hasn't been an option, really. We set up our controls network and everything works, and as long as things are working okay, we just kind of let them go. And then when it breaks, then we start looking at it again, which is unfortunate, because when it breaks, often that's when big issues are coming up. So it'd be nice if we could fix them proactively. So one of our best examples in this situation is Princeton University. Some of you that are on here may have heard us talk about Princeton before. But Princeton has a massive stadium, and back in the fall, they had a situation where they had some panels that were failing on. So, oh, you guys can't see my screen. Let's see, just give me 1 second here. Hopefully that is working. Okay, perfect. Okay, sorry about that. You didn't miss much. So back in the fall, Princeton University had a situation. Their panels were failing on, and so their stadium lights would turn on in the middle of the night, so 2 a.m., things like that. And this actually persisted for a few months. At 2 a.m., these lights would turn on, it wasn't consistently 2 a.m., it was a bit random. And, you know, their on-call techs are getting a call, and then it's going all the way up the chain. And you have everyone from the neighbors who have massive stadium lights shining in their houses and can't sleep, to alarms in the system going off. And this is a great situation where your BuildPulse would catch that something's going on. But the challenge with this is they would then go and try and turn the lights off, and the lights wouldn't turn off. So the solution at midnight or 2 in the morning is just reset it, and they would go off, and we'd go off and hope that it wouldn't happen again. And then it kept happening and kept happening. And the reason was a network reason. So it ended up that they ran Visual BACnet, which is our analytics program, and found that the network health was 16%. So for those of you who aren't familiar, you're aiming for 100%. Their network was in critical condition. And they were able to find the source of this particular midnight light situation was because they had just too many things on the network. There was no one device that was going rogue. It was just a lot of different things and devices that were all adding up and taking too much bandwidth. And those particular panels had a fail-on setting. So this is a prime example of when there's lots of different analytics that can catch this, but when it's a network issue, it's a bit harder to dive into and find exactly the source of the problem. So this is a before capture of Princeton. So this is a Wireshark capture. They started at 16%. They take the Wireshark capture and put it into Visual BACnet, and I'm actually going to skip forward a slide here. So capture the file on Wireshark, upload it to Visual BACnet. They get that overview screen I showed you, and then they're able to explore a bit. And so one of the things that I think is very useful for especially smaller universities that might not have quite as many resources and people who are quite as extensively experienced, particularly with Wireshark, is that all you need to do is be able to capture the file. You don't need to be able to dig through it in Wireshark. You can put it into Visual BACnet. And we have a ton of diagnostic checks. I think we're up to 27 or 8 as of our brand new release today. And we divide those into critical and scored checks. So you can look at the critical ones and go, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to solve those problems. And a lot of the time, once you solve those critical problems, the scored ones will fall into place. So, and those are things like traffic thresholds, traffic rates. And when you have unresponsive devices and routers going crazy, that affects those scored checks, that affects those traffic rates, because everyone's looking for them all the time. So we try to prioritize what you should work on with the information that we have. And then for those that are more skilled and more knowledgeable, you can dig down right into the Wireshark frame if you so choose, figure out what device is causing the problem. So Princeton was able to identify some new devices that they'd added to the network, and they ended up taking those and actually putting them on a separate network because it was just causing too many problems. And the devices were causing problems, but it was also just that their network threshold was being reached because they'd put so much on it. So this is a really great example of being able to kind of dig in, figure out which devices they were having trouble with. And in Princeton's case, they were able to isolate that information and send it to the vendor and talk to the vendor and say, hey, we know that it's your devices that are causing the problem. And it was actually the vendor who suggested putting them on a separate network. So this is a very powerful tool when you're working with multiple vendors, trying to manage them and trying to reduce the finger pointing between them. You can drill down and figure out exactly who's causing the problem. So I'm just going to go back to the slide I skipped. This is the after. So the very interesting thing about this is that Princeton ran Visual BACnet for the first time. They discovered the tool when they were having these issues. They started at 16%, as I showed you. There were 198 global whois, 14 unresponsive devices, a long response time of 6 seconds. And so they took those devices, I believe they were lighting devices, took them off the network, and then ran it again, and it was still fairly low. They had visibility into all of these things they'd never had before. And so they then called in their 2 main vendors, and so in this case it was Automated Logic and Siemens, called them in and said, we want to improve our network. We're at 16%. Got them on site for 4 or 5 days, sitting side by side at a desk, and had both of those vendors work on the network to get it up. And so after that week, they ended at 51% network health. They had 17 global whois, no unresponsive devices, and a 3.8 second long response time. Still not perfect, but a huge improvement. And they saw a lot of their issues going away. And since then, I know they've got it up into the 70s or even the 80s. So it's vastly improved. But once they were able to build this strong network, now they're able to put a lot more emphasis on their energy analytics. Now they're able to look at optimizing this network, because when you have unresponsive devices and a shoddy network that all of this stuff is sitting on top of, that data that you are getting, that data that BuildPulse is pulling in, isn't as reliable. So it's really, really important to make sure that you have a solid network, a solid foundation. That's going to give you really good information to then make decisions about energy optimization and helping find those devices that might be causing problems. So I just saw a question come in about what is a global whois. So a global whois is when a device sends out a whois to all of the different devices on its network, getting all of those devices to identify who they are. It can happen for a variety of reasons, and sometimes they should happen and sometimes they don't. Some devices are programmed to do this, can be even every minute. Others do it much less often than that. If you can actually force one, if you do a global discover on a device, you can cause that to happen, and it will allow you to then know all of the devices in your network. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I was going to say really quick, Monica, so to your point of the global whois, we've seen this a bunch in different spaces where the controls expert who came in would set up the global whois or something like that, and then it does what's considered a denial of service attack, where it basically, because it's asking for so much information, it blocks your mission critical services from going. So just imagine if somebody was constantly just bugging you for updates and doesn't allow you to actually get any work done. So we've seen this and a couple other configurations oftentimes where we don't go troubleshoot it. A tool like this would be amazing for troubleshooting that. Optigo Networks tool is pretty awesome. But we will see unresponsive controllers, which then the team has to go sort of troubleshoot. So having this tool on the upfront when you're doing the setup is going to help out a ton. Especially, I mean, we just did an install with a JCI client, and JCI for BACnet doesn't require unique device IDs, but to actually work with other systems, it would require unique IDs. And so these types of sort of reports are going to help you know if the controls guy who's coming in and doing the setup is actually doing it at a high enough standard. So this is pretty cool.
Great. So hopefully you can still see my screen. I did just pull up a file in Visual BACnet. That's a really good example of global whois. This is just the graph on our home screen that's showing all of the traffic in this network. And this one just speaks really strongly to me because in this case there's a global whois happening every minute, and so you can A, very clearly see that, and B, you can see how many packets compared to the normal traffic this is causing. So we're getting 400 to 500 packets every minute that wouldn't need to be on the network or don't need to be on the network. So if you have more than one device doing that, or you have an already very busy network and you start adding that to it, it can be challenging. Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, I can only second what you just said there, Jason, in that, both of these products can work very well together and are also very necessary. I mean, having a great network and then sucking up all kinds of energy and not having any insight into where you're being efficient is only going to be so good, especially as more and more universities are adopting various different goals and targets for sustainability and energy use. But again, you need all that data, and you need to have a good network for it to sit on. So we love working with people like BuildPulse. So we have a question for you, I think, Jason, from Matt. Thank you, Matt. How automated is the process of organizing the archive data and providing reports based on system performance? Matt, if that question is not for Jason, let us know, but I think it is.
Yeah, so on our end, what we do is we have a device that goes on site, and then it actually pulls data directly from these systems. So as Monica mentioned, we don't do like a giant request. We do what's called a series parallel request. So we pull a little bit of information from the system every 5 minutes, and then we basically automate the whole process. So from your perspective, it would just be plug and play. You plug it in like an Apple TV. And then we go through the discovery and setup of all the data. We don't do archive data, so if you had trend logs or something, we normally don't use that data because it's such a manual process to get archive and trend logs out of the building automation system. It's just easier for everybody if you just start at day one with the data coming off of our device. So it's plug and play, and then normally there's a training after we set up and mapped all the data. We'll have like an hour training session every other week until your team's up to speed. And then from there, most of these teams are self-serve. So I hope that answered your question.
I hope it did too, and if it doesn't, hopefully Matt will let us know. I have a question for you also, and if anyone else has questions, now is a great time to submit them. I guess I could put that slide up. We are happy to answer them. But Jason, can you speak a little bit to the amount of, you know, we were just talking about network traffic and putting too much traffic on your network. Can you talk, does this, you know, using BuildPulse, how much traffic does it put on the system, and how do you typically deal with that?
Yeah, so we basically, when we do initial discovery and setup, we'll, similar to what you guys do with your system, but we don't actually build out sort of reports on the performance, but we basically have the response times for our requests, and then we can tell you how long it takes, like average read time for an interface. And then we've worked with Johnson Controls, we've worked with Siemens, we've worked with all these systems before, so we know how to sort of scale it up so that way we get the data that you need without, you know, just pinging it for all data off the system. So like an Allerton system, for example, they'll have a ton of data points potentially on their controller, but in reality for commissioning and reporting, you only need about 20. So we already know those 20 that you need to go get. You don't have to turn data on and off. We'll just go grab it for you. And then we scale it all up, so we're not going to do an all-at-once thing. We do each individual interface. We can turn it on and off and change the read time. So that way, if you have one interface that maybe is mission critical on a boiler, we can either turn it off or turn it down if it's making an impact on performance. And then we have a conversation with the customer. So if we notice something's off, we'll let them know. But you know, going back to that, how do you reduce the amount of time your team has to retroactively fix things? If these groups would have used your guys' Optigo sort of report after the building automation controls guy had gone in there, the system would have been set up so that individual interface would be responding more properly. So will scale it up and let you know if there's issues with stuff, but we won't, like, we don't have the tools that Optigo has to actually troubleshoot network issues. We just know, you know, that device potentially has an issue. So, and you often see it on like new installs and things like that, where people are sort of making tweaks. And as you mentioned, I think you found that in the lighting stuff at Princeton.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common, this stuff. Unfortunately, it's not all just install it once and it's perfect. There'd be a lot less jobs here if it was. And a lot less stressed out people probably too. Great. Well, if anyone else has any questions, now is the time to ask. Otherwise, both of our contact information is on the screen, so you're more than welcome to send us a message or check out more information about us. We also have an ongoing webinar series, so we actually have another webinar next week learning about troubleshooting using Wireshark, so feel free to register for that. But I don't see any other questions. So, Jason, unless you have any questions for me or anything else you'd like to add? Okay.
No, I'd say, you know, I appreciate the time, and in general, if anyone has questions, it doesn't have to be about the BuildPulse system specifically. If you're wondering, you know, what KPIs should I choose, or how should I change my strategy for fixes and other things, happy to have that conversation, because we're working with a ton of universities and schools just like you. So I appreciate your time.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time as well, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from some of our people.
Great. Have a good day.
Right. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.